Friends, Shabbat Shalom to everyone here. It's delightful to be with you this evening to share some words of Torah. I just want to say there was a little bit of stress in the beginning of our service. I gave Becky and Nathan some Hamantaschen, and both of them had at least one, and I thought we were going to have to postpone the service, but we didn't. But I know what they're going to be doing this evening. The sugar rush is going to be scary. Yeah. I'm going to keep you up on that. Friends, Jewish parents will say to me, Rabbi, I want my kids to have a strong Jewish identity. And I think to myself, but what does that really mean? If we are part of the Orthodox community, Jewish identity is very clear. Live the life of the commandments, the mitzvot. Observe Shabbat. Pray 3 times a day. Study Torah. No pork, shellfish, or cheeseburgers. If we are secular Zionists living in Israel, Jewish identity means something completely different. It means we Jews need our own country. We want our own language and culture, and we are willing to die for that. And who really needs religion? Or if you are Yiddishist, there aren't that many around anymore, but they were an important part of 20th century Jewish life. A Yiddishist is someone who honors the Yiddish language, the literature, the culture of Eastern European Jews. Again, very little religion, and don't forget borscht with sour cream. It's very good. There are many other forms of identity. And certainly, there is this complex overlapping of different kinds of identities. But the common denominator is this for me. Jewish identity leads to a connection with the Jewish people. And it's necessary to ask ourselves, how strong is that connection, is that identity? That, to me, is what is at stake in the festival of Purim. Today was Purim. Sunday is Shushan Purim, and for today, in modern life, Purim is normally commemorated by costumes. I'm supposed to wear this king's hat on Sunday for our religious school, and I will do it. There'll be parties, there's spiels where you do ridiculous parodies. You read Hamantaschen, as we referred to before. The reading of the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, the story is read with noisy interruptions. When the name of Haman is said, you boo or you make a noise. But like most things in Judaism, there is always a deeper meaning. The Book of Esther, read on Purim, is probably the most relevant book, the most relevant story for modern Jews who are trying to define this idea of Jewish identity. We know the story superficially. King Ahasuerus of Persia seeks a new queen. Esther comes forward. She's an assimilated Jew. She's encouraged by Mordecai, her adopted father, to seek to be the new queen. She keeps her identity a secret. A plot emerges by Haman to destroy the Jews. His anti-Semitism is without end. He is really vicious, and he wants literally to commit genocide. Mordecai becomes concerned about this, and he calls upon Esther the queen, extremely beloved by the king, to intervene. And she's reluctant to do so. She's uncomfortable with coming out of hiding. And indeed, the word Esther, her name, is from the Hebrew root samech taf resh, which literally means to hide, to conceal. Approaching the king unannounced would put her at risk. And she is a concealer. She doesn't want to bring forth her identity, her connection to the Jewish people. But in a transformational moment, she comes out of her self-imposed exile. And Mordecai challenges her in really the climax of this story. And this is what he says to her, he says, do not imagine that you, of all the Jews, will escape with your life by being in the king's palace. On the contrary, if you keep silent in this crisis, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another quarter, while you in your father's house will perish. And perhaps you have attained to royal position for just such a crisis. End of quote. This is an awakening for her and leads her to become one of the most public Jews in our long Jewish history. And she reveals Haman, and the story is a beautiful one. I would ask you to read the entire book of Esther. It's worth a quick read. Now, the story is a fable, and yet its relevance is profound. At critical moments, how publicly Jewish are we willing to be? For many of us, we have an Esther moment in our lives. Are we willing to affirm our identity without inhibition, even at personal risk? It can happen in school, at a party, in the office, among friends, in a casual comment, or on Twitter. That is a dilemma for us diaspora Jews. We Jews of Kansas City know about this kind of affirmation quite directly. Eddie Jacobson was an ordinary Jewish guy from the Lower East Side of New York, and when Eddie was a child, his parents moved to Kansas City. He became a friend of Harry Truman. They became close friends and did military service together during the First World War, and decided that when the war was over, they would go into business together. They set up a clothing store in Kansas City. It failed, and soon they drifted apart. Eddie continued selling clothes. Truman went into politics. In 1947 and 48, the Jews of the world needed the support of the United States of America for the state of Israel to be proclaimed and recognized. The State Department was against it and advised the president not to support the creation of the state of Israel. Truman refused to see Chaim Weizmann, the man who would become the first president of Israel. Somebody remembered that Harry S. Truman had a childhood friend called Eddie Jacobson. So they reached out to Eddie, and I can imagine that he did not jump at the request. Yet eventually Eddie phoned up President Truman and said he had to come to see him. His advisors said no. Truman said, how could he not see this old friend of his? When Eddie arrived at the White House, Truman said, Eddie, you can talk to me about anything except Israel. Okay, said Eddie, and he stood in the Oval Office in front of the President of the United States and began to cry. Eddie, why are you crying? Asked Truman. Eddie pointed to the marble statue in the room and said, who is that, Harry? That's my hero, Andrew Jackson, Truman replied. You really admire this man? Asked Eddie. Yes. And he had an influence on you? Yes, said Truman. Then said Eddie, I have a hero. His name is Chaim Weizmann. Harry, for my sake, see the man. Harry looked at Eddie, and he knew that he couldn't say no to his old friend. That is how Chaim Weizmann got to see the President Harry S. Truman, and that is how America voted in favor of the creation of the State of Israel. And if Eddie hadn't gone to see Truman and to stand up as a friend and as a Jew, Truman would not have taken the position that he did. And if the United States had not voted, Israel would not have been brought into being. Eddie Jacobson had this Queen Esther moment and changed Jewish history. And that is what Jewish identity is about at its best to me. That is a moment that keeps recurring again and again in Jewish history. I was quite moved by Judge Merrick Garland's expression of his Jewish identity this week. Garland grew visibly emotional at his Senate confirmation hearing as our next Attorney General, recounted how his grandparents fled anti-Semitic pogroms in Russia for the promise of a better life in the United States. Judge Garland was asked what motivated him to pursue a career in law, and this is what he said. I come from a family where my grandparents fled anti-Semitism and persecution. The country took us in and protected us. Garland said, choking back tears. I feel an obligation to the country to pay back, and this is the highest, best use of my own set of skills to pay back. Here's my point. We need to take Queen Esther quite seriously. Contracting our Judaism, taking a low profile, denies part of ourselves, robs us of strong eternal compass, and drains the Jewish people of their strength and relevance. Tonight, I know I am honored to speak to you, some of the most proud Jews in Kansas City. And my call to all of us is we need to be public Jews like Queen Esther became. Quite transparent about who we are, strong in our identity, knowledgeable, even strident when it's necessary. We need to stand proud for our heritage and identity, to proclaim it without any reticence. In the beginning, young Queen Esther hid her Judaism, denied an important part of herself, and at the critical moment came out of hiding and saved the Jewish people. To be born a Jew and to be part of the Jewish people is an extraordinary gift. That's why I became a rabbi. I've lived my life with that belief. That belief is what a meaningful Jewish identity is. I am grateful that you share that sense of blessing with me. In our confused world, the Jews are more vital than ever before. The Jewish people needs us. The world needs us. I pray that all Jews can say with pride and without hesitation, of all the things that I can say about myself, I am most proud of being a Jew. Of all the things that I can say about myself, I am most proud of being a Jew. Shabbat Shalom.